Hi, it's great to get together again. Had a ball the last time through Creative Force, and this time we're going to do it all over again from a different angle, in fact from many angles simultaneously. This particular video is called, in fact the project itself is called Quantum Guitar. I chose to use that particular term because of so many factors involved in this that it's really impossible to see this either as a micro subject or a macrocosmic subject. There are forms that we'll be dealing with in this that are in unison with the volumes of Creative Force, which we're dealing with parental forms. This time we're going to be dealing with parental transformations, multiple substitutions, linear motion, spatial fingerings, automatic destinations, quite a number of things that are going to come about simultaneously. The choice of doing things with regards to intellectual retainment, which I refer to as step time, compared to what I at times choose to portray from the emotions and from the heart and soul melodically, which I refer to as real time. There are so many things in quantum guitar to consider that it's impossible to even scratch the surface, and maybe that's what I find most of all interesting in sharing this with all of you. The idea of incorporating into this on your part in behalf of the opportunities themselves, to begin to consider your opportunity and your responsibility and your accuracy with regards to the advantage of performing in the midst of other individuals as the audience, as well as those who are working with you and that are interacting with you. That's what this is all about, this particular series of works. And once again, to remind you, it's referred to as quantum guitar. Before we go any further, there are so many people involved in this, and I would like to bring to your attention that there are going to be some live performances, filming that will be available to you at certain points in this project. These particular performances took place in New York City in November in 1995 at a place called the Knitting Factory. There it was a performance with a quartet that I've had on the road for approximately 6 or 7 months now. On piano is James Riddle, on bass is Steve Beskrone, and on drums is Scott Robinson. There are so many things to bring to your attention that I think that makes it super important to bring the most valuable of them all to your attention. And that's tuning your guitar in unison with mine so that we can be compatible and in balance as much as possible. So I'll give you a tone on the A, and I'll play that as an open A, so giving you a chance to tune to that first. Welcome, and let's get started. Before we get involved with transformations of these parental forms that were discussed sometime back, in fact, in 1993, on Creative Force, those two videos were dealing with the parental forms themselves and all of the substitutions that emerge from these amazing, magical forms on the guitar. The only two that are based upon multiplication as opposed to the piano's usage of addition. In this particular case, there were two of them, one being the augmented and the other being the diminished. The difference between then and now is going to be the addition of a pedal tone, giving these four-dimensional proportions, as opposed to the three-dimensional that were prevailing in the last two works. In this case, it has four names. This is an E diminished, as so. It's a B flat diminished, as so. It's a D flat diminished, as such. And it's a G diminished appropriately. So here we have four names vertically. Now horizontally the same thing occurs once again. Here we have four names horizontally. E diminished, G diminished, B flat diminished, and D flat diminished. The difference between then and now is going to be the addition of a pedal tone beneath it. So now we have this. E diminished over A. G diminished over A. B flat diminished over A. D flat diminished over A. Likewise, with those of you who are familiar with the last works on REH, we were talking about the four dominant seventh chords that came from the diminished chord itself as a parental form. In this particular case, these now become polychords automatically. So that prior to now, we were referring to the E diminished with lowering one tone, the root, to E flat, transform it into an E flat seventh. This time it's over A. Back to the parental form, the diminished. And we'll now take the B flat of that diminished chord, the second name of it, and lower the B flat to an A. It's an A seventh over A. Back to the parent. We'll now lower the D flat to C. It's now a C seventh over A. Back to the parental form again. G diminished. G to G flat. G flat seventh over A. So too, all of these forms collectively conceal a secret of the guitar, which is primarily based upon vertical distributions and horizontal distributions. I've shared with you primarily, to begin with, the vertical formations. Horizontally, they all apply likewise, just the way the parent did with automatic fingerings, the same all the time. The only difference now, we're talking about four different subjects. In the case of the E flat diminished, coming from the E, rather from the E diminished, going to an E flat seventh, it looked like this. Now if you move that a minor third horizontally up the fingerboard, which is the diminished interval, it will be here. Now you have a G to a G flat. These transformations are coming only from the fourth string. Since there are 4, 3, 2, and 1 being used, the fourth, the third, the second, and the first, the organization of string groups applies to this particular demonstration, we're taking the fourth string and lowering the fourth to E flat. Once again, the second inversion, the G on the fourth string to G flat. The third inversion, the B flat on the fourth string to A. And the fourth inversion, the D flat on the fourth string to C, C seventh. So now we have this to consider. E flat seventh over A, horizontal. G flat seventh over A. B flat seventh, or rather A seventh over A. And finally C seventh over A. That's only one of the four formations that structure the fingering of the guitar's automatic proportions. The other three look like this. A seventh over A, C seventh over A, E flat seventh over A, and G flat seventh over A. And those proportions are being formulated from the third string's points of reference. Therefore, A, C, E flat, and G flat. The third arrangement is on the second string. This time it's C, which again, as a reminder of the past videos called Creative Force, let me bring your attention to that particular grouping came from this parental form. C sharp to C became C seventh, and the C sharp just happened to be on the second string. So now we're going to take that and horizontally distribute it as such. C seventh over A, E flat seventh over A, G flat seventh over A, and A seventh over A. That's the third of the four groups. The fourth, in the first position, looks like this. Now we're going from the first string, G to G flat, makes the G flat seventh over A. First string B flat to A. The next one is D flat to C, seventh over A. And finally, we have E to E flat. So now we have four more of these, and what we now have is this. The difference between then and now was the use of substitutions were primarily being based upon a three-dimensional concern. In other words, if I were to improvise substitutionally against an A seventh in this particular position, as I discussed before, I use personally through my own choice, I enjoy using a minor seventh, a perfect fifth higher, from the root being the name of the key center of the chord. So this being an A seventh, my personal choice is an E minor seventh. If in that same position my choice had been a G flat seventh, coming from the parent form, to a G flat seventh here, G diminished, to G flat seventh. In that position, that area in a two-dimensional formation would be like this. So on and so forth. The nature of these forms that I've brought to your attention some time ago had a great deal to do with my substitutions in a three-dimensional context. In other words, when I say three-dimension, I'm thinking of one key center in the case of the diminished chord being lowered from the third string in this particular position, from the B flat to an A, as so. Under this, my substitution for this at that particular point in time had a great deal to do with a perfect fifth higher to the key of E, which I've discussed in depth some time back, appearing as such in this particular position. So you can see that all of that is here. In the sense of how this is going to portray itself with regards to substitutions horizontally, as I've said a moment back, this form shall move in minor thirds as so. So too shall these forms as linear proportion look like this. What this brought to my attention was a solution to a perceptual problem with regards to defining one parental form against the other. What did they have to do with each other? In this particular case, the diminished chord was the primary form that caused all of these horizontal and vertical forms for me personally in the idiom that I was functioning in. So here we had this, this, and this. But none of these things contained for me at that particular point the augmented form, which was based upon pure majors and pure minors. And that, of course, also totally automatic in major thirds as opposed to minor thirds. This is what resulted separate from the analysis. In the case of an A seventh, as I brought to your attention, my initial concern was E minor seventh. In doing it as so, this had nothing to do with an A7 sharp 5. It had nothing to do with an A7 flat 5. And the solution of this came about as such. The second inversion of A seventh from the diminished chord here is the first on a 4-3-2-1 group. The second is here. This is where the solution can be found. In doing so, I have an A seventh here. I can also see this as a polychord known as A major over G. When I raise the fifth, known as an A7 sharp 5, it's also viewable as an A augmented over G. Because of this, when I see this in the light of multiple substitutions, I now have this to think of. It initially came from the diminished chord with the B flat to A seventh. By raising the fifth, A7 sharp 5. It sounded good to me in those years prior to having the ability to analyze this, to just play melodies against such changes as this that made a lot of sense to me in terms of personal fulfillment. And along that time, along those forms, I came to enjoy this particular substitution for that chord. A7 sharp 5, B flat minor 7th. But I didn't quite know what that had to do with the augmented form as a parental structure. There is the B flat minor. We have here an A augmented, an F augmented, a C sharp augmented, over G. If I take the A augmented and raise the root 1/2 step higher, I now have B flat minor over G. B flat minor over G gives me the proportions of an E flat 9 without the root. Since I initially learned in the blues idiom with players such as Willis Jackson, Gene Ammons, Sonny Stitt in the earlier days, these particular forms fit the blues. When this enters into it, the same thing takes place. The only difference now is the resolution of the final note. So that if I were to play a B flat minor 7th chord as such, and play this line for you, you'll hear it as so. The only difference in this change coming up is the last note. So now I have a B flat minor 7th against A, 7th sharp 5. That also should be seen as coming not only from the E flat 7th, which is the B flat minor, a perfect 5th higher, as opposed to a B flat minor as the augmented transformation of one note, one step higher, a minor 2nd higher, as opposed to a perfect 5th. So in one I had B flat minor for E flat 7th, in the other I have B flat minor for A 7th. This comes about as so. If I take the E flat 7th, the E flat 9, and lower the 5th, the sharp 5, to a perfect 5th, I now have this, which is the diminished chord, which initially came from the augmented form as well. So now there is a marriage between the two parental forms, and there is a balance, a natural balance between this form of perception in controlling these forms. So now I can think of this with regards to the pedal tone being A. Now I can think of G to G flat over A, C sharp to C over A, E to E flat over A, B flat to A over A. Now it's in 4 dimensions as opposed to 3 dimensions mentioned earlier. With regards to the dominant 7ths themselves, we have 4 of them in each diminished chord over the pedal tone. So the E flat 7th is going to be, or rather the G flat 7th will be here. And like before, I had G flat 7th giving me the perfect 5th higher, D flat minor 7th would be the substitution. If I then coordinate B flat minor 7th with the next multiple substitution, it will add this to the family. The next would be D flat to C over A, would give me G minor 7th. D flat 7th came from the G flat. So D flat minor 7th here, over A, chord that now shall be played is an A7 sharp 5, and the substitution that I'm going to demonstrate here is in one position as an E minor 7th. One more time. Again, A7 sharp 5, but now the substitution shall be B flat minor 7th. Now again an A7 sharp 5, the substitution shall be G minor 7th. Now the A7 sharp 5 shall be played again, and this time the substitution will be from the D flat minor 7th. Now let's see how we can, through motion of these forms, one flowing into another, multiple substitutions emerge on the same voicing, an A7 sharp 5. Here I'm going to use two at a time to give you a demonstration to hear the harmonies and the melodies in these substitutions. A7 sharp 5. I now will play E minor 7th into G minor 7th. How about G minor 7th into E minor 7th? The next shall be D flat minor 7th, also with a B flat minor 7th against A7 sharp 5. One more time. Two different forms in light of that. Now let's take another possibility, which could also be a B flat minor 7th into a G minor 7th. One more time. Before moving on to further extensions, including linear expressions and motion on the guitar as a matrix, I'd like to add to what we've been talking about so far a situation that occurs time and time again between musicians. There are two different opinions for what polychords may be called, and in many cases, with regards to a chord such as A7 sharp 5 being seen as A augmented over G in this particular string group, that for some musicians, especially in the case of pianists, these particular opinions consider it in this context that this is a triad, but the pedal tone is not a complete key center with root, third, and fifth in it. So that a polychord in those cases are referred to as two different chordal keys. So when we are doing this, this is one way of looking at it, which is normally seen as with a slash. You'll see A augmented slash G, or you might even see in a case like a chord like this, a D minor 7 flat 5 can also be seen with a pedal tone as an E underneath, D minor 7 flat 5 slash E. Or it can also be seen without that pedal tone as F minor slash D. This is one way of seeing polychords referred to much along the lines idiomatically of hard bop. Now you can see how the A7 sharp 5 has four multiple substitutions. In this particular case being B flat minor 7th, E minor 7th, G minor 7th, and D flat minor 7th. Now let me bring to your attention the use of this in a different kind of way. What I will do is play those same substitutions, and now let's take the clusters themselves. Instead of only the A7 sharp 5, let's try some different proportions. Let's try the A7 sharp 5 with these multiple substitutions. First and foremost, over the polychord called E flat 7th sharp 5. And in this particular case, the E flat 7 sharp 5 is like this over the A. One more time. One more time. One more time. One more time. In this particular case, what I've just played was the B flat minor 7th against it, a G minor 7th against it, a D flat minor 7th against it, and an E minor 7th against it. And now that's against the E flat 7th sharp 5 over A. Likewise, moving in a minor third, the same thing will occur again over a C 7th sharp 5 over A. And again over an A 7 sharp 5 as it initially did to begin with. And the final addition would be the G flat 7 sharp 5 over A. With the same substitutions multiplied against these multiplications of the structure itself as an architectural structure. So now let's take it from the bottom, from the G flat 7 sharp 5, and move these in minor thirds as so. And in the case of the line forms that I am improvising through, I'm taking the substitution as a minor 7th, starting with a B flat minor 7th here, D flat minor 7th here, E minor 7th here, and G minor 7th here. That would be the horizontal display of this particular form of motion. And then we have the vertical tangents being in the same way, the B flat minor 7th here, the D flat minor 7th here, the E minor 7th here, and the G minor 7th here. So you see we have a vertical structure of all of these minor 7ths as multiple substitutions, as well as horizontal for any single type of those substitutions. And we'll get to that in a little while. The chord that shall be played against this time through shall be in this order: G flat 7 sharp 5 over A, A7 sharp 5 over A, C7 sharp 5 over A, and E flat 7 sharp 5 over A. And each time what I shall do is improvise over the substitutions multiply. Therefore you'll hear B flat minor 7th over G flat 7 sharp 5, D flat minor 7th, E minor 7th, and G minor 7th over the same chord. Then you'll hear the same multiples over A7 sharp 5, and so on and so on. And what I'll do is I'll call the name of the substitution that I'm using so that you can get an idea of the compatibility between the two. First, the chord is G flat 7 sharp 5 over A. I'll be playing in B flat minor. Now I'll play in D flat minor. Now I'll play in E minor. Now I'll play in G minor. A7 sharp 5 over A, B flat minor. D flat minor 7th. E minor 7th. G minor 7th. The next chord, C7 sharp 5 over A, B flat minor. D flat minor. E minor. G minor. The next chord is E flat 7 sharp 5 over A. B flat minor. D flat minor. E minor. G minor. There are the four total forms, the 7 sharp 5, dominant 7 sharp 5, and the way they are being used is as polychords over the A as substitutions for each other, and also substitutions as the households of each of the substitutions that are being used as minor sevenths. Therefore, there is the house of G flat as a key center for the structural, the architecture of improvisation is going to take place within that topic. So what I'm referring to as a house is a topic. In the case of the G flat 7 sharp 5, it looks like this is the house. The topic as a polychord is A. And the chord that is being taken from it, likewise, as I've described earlier, in coordination with 2 volumes on the same phenomenon known as creative force, we're dealing with these phenomena as well over A. And what you're hearing is 4 named topics containing 4 named substitutions in multiple action, both vertically and horizontally. I think it's important to bring to your attention some things that were extremely helpful for me with my analysis of the fingerings, that in some areas of the guitar I came to find that activity became more comfortable due to the following revealings. Let's say I were to think of an A minor seventh in this area, to this area. Here, if I were to use this form, I find that each form that I have used so far in terms of my areas of activity and the line forms involved in that with the minor sevenths flow as follow. There's the beginning with the fourth finger, the beginning with the first finger. And by the same token, where you see at the beginning of the fourth finger, you'll also see it at a higher octave, the beginning of a first finger on a different string. So that here I begin low with the fourth finger and high with the first finger. Here I begin with the first finger low and high with the fourth finger. Here I begin with the first finger on the fourth string low and the fourth finger on the second string high. Here I begin with the first finger on the second string and the fourth finger on the fifth string low. So all of this continues, and this is what happens. And these are areas that lead me into more dexterity to fully take advantage of this. So that I have the entire neck of the guitar as one topic, with freedom to use any area of the guitar, with no specific area more comfortable than another. This series of forms is going to bring to your attention a freedom that is extremely rewarding. One of the ones that I incorporated and memorized was this one here. From C to C sharp, it now goes here. D is next, would be here. D sharp or E flat is here. E is here. F is here. And it goes like this. It then occurred to me, well, if that is in ascent, let me see how that would function in descent, if the same thing holds true. If all of this is right there under my fingers in such a short distance of range in terms of the frets. So here in descent, it occurred like this. C is here, the B is here, the B flat is right here. And this is the one I've chosen. I could have put it here. The A is here, A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C. So that caused this one to be memorized. And useful in conditions like this. Since it ends there, I can then couple that with a form such as this. Many things can be used for that. In many ways. So there are many possibilities with using forms like this, but before I get into sharing some of them with you, I'd like to point something else out to you visually about the guitar's fingerboard. The guitar is a matrix, unlike the piano being a horizontal mechanism that is moving either from left to the right or from right to left. Other than the orchestral use of this particular tool, this mechanism. The guitar, not only does it have horizontal left and right, but it also has vertical up and down, or down to up. So let's talk about that in terms of a compass for that particular nature of this mechanism. If I were to choose to see my point of motion in this position under the terms of north being based upon tonal increase from lows to highs for ascent, being referred to as north, or from highs to lows being referred to as south, it would apply like this. If I were to take a line form that is in motion going south, it would sound like this. It's going from high to low. Anything going north would be like this. There I'm going from low to high. If I take a form like this, in terms of its proportions, I would then consider that west. If I were to take a form like that with regards to these motions going in this direction, I would then consider that east. If I were to take this application here, something else is taking place in this construction. I'm using all 6 strings in the form that is manifesting itself before you right now, and I'll call them out to you without repetition of them. Here we have the 5th, the 3rd, the 2nd, the 4th, the 1st, the 6th. The 3rd was repeated, and the entire thing begins again. So this is all 6 strings, and this particular form has another proportion to it, another form of control, and that's a pivot. The pivot is taking place like this, and I'll move it up here a major second to the 5th fret to demonstrate this accordingly. The pivot is with the 2nd finger, and there it is. That sets me up for the first thing to go down that just happened, and the entire thing repeats itself, creating a constant chromatic form in my description of it, moving to the east on the guitar for me in my position viewpoint. If I were to take the same thing and now consider it, since it is using all 6 strings, if I consider that as, instead of in motion like that, if I think about it as an ostinado, if I loop it without that pivot, this will occur. When that occurs as so, then I can begin to explain to you the use of the same fingerings for other string groups. In the case of a 6 to 5 as opposed to 6, including everything 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as just demonstrated, the 6 to 5 would take the same fingerings that were seen here and place them here. So that this now becomes this. So those particular fingerings, I refer to these things as spatial fingerings because they came from spatial positions in this structure and were applied mechanically to this structure with no melodic concern whatsoever. In doing so, I then would advise you to take fingerings of the things that you are playing, the patterns that you already have absorbed, and begin to spread them into different various areas of the guitar with your ears neutral in the process, so that your ears are not judgmentally governing your choice of possibilities for improvisation, which has to be neutral at all times. So now we have 6-5, we have 5-4, we have 4-3, so on and so forth. Now let's take that and begin to pass from one to another, as so. And I'm going to take this moving north in a tonal ascent. If I were to move southward, it would appear as such and sound as such. If I were to then take it and incorporate into this motion the pivot that was used prior to the ostinato or the loop, this would occur then. As I said before, keep in mind that my perspective in terms of latitude and longitude is as so. This to me is west, this to me is east, this tonally is north, tonally descent is south. Therefore, the same form with the pivot included, if I were to play this as moving north in terms of pitch, ascending, and moving to this area of the guitar, which is the west, it would appear like this, with a pivot. And by the same token, keep in mind that that is in motion northwest. If I were to take the same pattern and perform it as southwest, it then would move like this. If I were to move that same pattern northeast, it would occur like this. If I were to move that same pattern southeast, it would occur like this. To expand upon what we've been talking about so far, along the lines of these particular directions with regards to longitude and latitude as on the guitar as a matrix, I would then suggest for you to give some consideration to some automatic destinations, in other words, some pieces and parts that play their role in making it easier for both hands to be syncopated in such a way that you gain some dexterity while things are in motion at all times without having to think about placing your hand in a place that it cannot get to in time. A good example of that would be the use of the open strings. And along with these open strings, including the E to an A, the A to a D, the D to a G, G to B, and B to E, all of these are in perfect fourth. So now you can also include another highly automatic function that is very easy to play physically, which is the barred representation of the perfect fourth as well. That one goes like this. With the exception of the third and second strings, the fingering is always barred the same. Therefore, what was done like this is now done like this. So now when you use both of those together, you have this effect. Or which I personally think is kind of difficult to do solely as you've seen it done at this very moment, primarily because I add other automatic destination factors in this, other forms that are comfortable for me personally, such as the use of tritones like this. In this particular case, a very comfortable way of using this for me goes like this. Which sounds almost like whole tones. When I connect these tritones with open strings, you see they begin to move in different directions. Now let's consider the spatial fingerings that occurred from the use of this particular chromatic form, which came from multiple directions using multiple strings simultaneously. This one here is now to be added to the entourage. Here I've added a fourth factor, and this is the slur arpeggiated. In this case, a pure major triad, with the dominant seventh being the trigger point. So you see, these begin to take different shapes with regards to their improvisations in an extremely free method. Now the next thing is, how do these couple with chordal forms to give them a more melodic content? The substitutions I'm now going to play against this will contain not only the variable multiple substitutions coming from the parental form, being that diminished chord and the minor scales that come from it, or better yet, the minor melodies, which in many cases have been referred to as modal considerations. A good example is Jörg Hause in Germany had, as a musicologist, had outlined quite a number of my former solos on different albums, older albums, as Lydian forms and mixolydian forms, and analyzed it as such as a musicologist. In this particular case, all of the minor forms that you're going to hear can be called modal types of terms, but I'm thinking of them generally just for a simple way of getting through all of this without getting into the intricacies of logic. So this chord is a D flat 7 sharp 5 sharp 9, and I'm going to call off the key centers of the general minor 7th chords that I'm going to solo through as line forms. D minor. B minor 7th. A flat minor 7th. F minor 7th. That particular form is, as I brought to your attention, a D flat 7 sharp 5 sharp 9 over E. There are many things to bring to your attention at this point for you to consider and contemplate on with regards to available possibilities here with the use of auto destinations as resolution points. If I were to use any of these inversions of these substitutions, such as D minor 7th, B minor 7th, A flat minor 7th, or F minor 7th, there are open strings that can be used as resolutions, just as they were used with the spatial fingerings and the auto destinations such as these, if I'm thinking of, let's say, D minor seventh, and I begin to be freely explosive with the use, which takes courage, the use of these particular forms, the moment I'm here, I'm on A flat minor, on this particular inversion. But in terms of the resolution, I resolved that line on an open string, on an open E. I could therefore have done the same thing coming from an A flat minor, from this direction in the same position, and use the G open string to do the same thing, to give you dissonance in the shape of something that is dancing on the canvas known as consonants. So here we have a consonant cluster known as A flat minor seventh, which is extremely dissonant, let's say, as opposed to a cluster like this, which I won't even name at the moment, but the important thing is dissonance. So here I have this consonant, and there's the dissonance as a resolution, as opposed to the dissonance into consonants as a resolution. So these are things to consider as well. Any form of motion from any direction on the guitar can either resolve into or out of any of the forms that have been talked about. That concludes the first edition of Quantum Guitar, and I really look forward to seeing you again in Volume 2.